What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Appreciate you guys tuning in for another video. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos. Still doing 3 videos a week right now, so we don't want you to miss out on any future videos. If you guys have any video ideas, always please drop them in the comments down below. That's what we're talking about here today, actually. This has been a highly requested video here over the last couple weeks, month at the most. Everyone's been asking about the Alabama rig or the Alabama rig setup, what I like to do, how I throw the Alabama rig. And we're gonna dive into all the details. I mean, we're walking through everything from, I'm gonna set one up here with you guys, talk about the equipment, the rod, the reel, the line, the baits I like to throw on it, the jig heads. We're diving into all of the juice on the Alabama rig setup. And really, you know, this is the perfect time of year to be throwing an Alabama rig. It's an excellent option anytime that you got cold weather, a little bit of wind, sun, cloudy. Doesn't really matter the conditions. They pretty much always bite the A-rig into that late fall, early winter, even really all the way through into the spring. So let's dive in. Let's talk all about the A-rig. And hopefully you guys can learn something from this video, apply it to your own fishing when you get out on the water in these cold water situations, and help you catch some more bass. All right, like I said, the A-rig is an excellent option for this time of year. The month of December is probably one of the best months to be throwing an A-rig. You know, we just had Thanksgiving here. We had the family in town. We did a good bit of fishing with my dad and Brittany's dad. And the A-rig is always a staple this time of year, especially, you know, when you got multiple people in the boat. Not everybody can be on the front of the boat. Not everyone gets first dibs on the perfect cast to whatever piece of structure you're fishing, or if you're out scoping fish out in the middle, there's only one person that can run the trolling motor. So having the A-rig for other people in the boat is an excellent option because of the drawing power of this bait. You know, it looks like a school of bait fish. So there is a huge drawing power. I mean, the fish are gonna swim a long way to check out an A-rig, and a lot of times they really bite it. So it has a huge area that the A-rig can cover. And it really opens up a lot of opportunities. It's an excellent bait for a co-angler or guys fishing off the back of the boat. You can cast it and wind it, and you're gonna catch some fish. You know, it's an excellent option for all of those scenarios. So let's just dive in and walk through the whole setup here. So there's really a couple different A-rigs that I use. This one here is the Hog Farmer. It may be called the BFL rig, something like that. And that is because it is legal in BFL and Toyota series tournaments. That's the main reason that I choose this one, because I want to get confidence in this bait for the situation that I may fish one of those events that an A-rig plays. I want to be very confident in this particular model A-rig and not have to customize one or anything like that. So this one comes with a lot of blades on it. It comes with screw locks already on the top 2 wires. So here in Tennessee, we're only allowed by state law to have 3 hooks on there. So you got to have 2 dummies on there. And I personally really don't like using a jig head with the hook cut off, because it kind of throws the balance of the whole A-rig off. You know, having 3 jig heads at the bottom is going to allow this bait to run perfectly straight every time with these hooks, the jig heads being at the bottom. You know, if you'd used the dummy jig head on the top here that was the same weight as these ones with the hooks, sometimes that bait may want to run with those dummies down, and that you really don't want that, because those fish could come up and bite those baits without a hook. So using the screw lock and ensuring that these swim baits up here have no weight on them, that's going to allow these 3 with the hooks to be running on the bottom every single time, and you don't have to worry about fish biting the baits that don't have hooks, because that's the last thing you want to do is get a bite and not hook them. So that's why I choose this one. Like I said, this is the Hog Farmer. I think it's called the BFL rig. Another great option is this one right here. I throw him around a lot. This is the stealth rig. It's obviously it's a little more stealthy. It's got the clear wires rather than the metal wires. Got some blades on there. You can customize all that stuff if you want. I generally like to leave the blades on, just that, an added flash and vibration, help you catch some more of those fish. But really, the A-rig setups in general are extremely customizable. These are things you can adjust the blades. If you like blades, you can leave blades on, you can take blades off. You can really customize all of the stuff on these A-rigs, and even down to the size jig heads, the size baits, all that sort of stuff is really customizable, and really, you can use your imagination on that. If you like a little bit different color in the middle, if you think it helps, by all means, go for it. That's going to help you catch some fish. Like this one here, I actually have, Kitex rigged up on it. I have 3.3 Kitex rigged up as my dummies, and then my 2, and then I actually have a bigger Kitex right here in the middle, just to, give a little bit bigger profile, the one that stands out behind a little bit. Most often, that's going to be the one that gets the bite. So I went with a little bit bigger swim bait on that one, to maybe target a bigger fish that's following it and kind of hone in on that little bit bigger swim bait. But there are so many things you can customize and play around with the A-rig and really dial in those little details of what the fish may want on that day when you're out on the water. But for me, I would say 75% of the time when I'm throwing an A-rig, it's going to be a pretty standard. They're all going to be the same bait. That's what I'm setting up here. This is one that I was using this past weekend, caught a lot of fish on it, and I had to redo it because the swim baits got all tore up from catching so many fish on it. So that's what we're doing here. So I have 2 of my dummy swim baits rigged up top. I really like these. This is the Yamamoto shad-shaped swimmer, the 3.7-inch size. It's that perfect little shad profile, but I really like this shad-shaped swimmer because it's almost a finesse style swim bait. It's not a real big paddle tail that's back there thumping real hard. They just have a real fine tail kick, a little bit of shimmy to them, and it really works well in this colder water. And then when you put 5 of them together, it looks like a perfect little school of threadfin that are trying to get away from those fish. So this is the Stealth Blue Glimmer color. That's what this one's called. This is one of my favorites for that clearish water here in the winter. The water gets really, as it gets colder, the water's going to get cleaner, and that's when I really like this color here. It just shows up really well in the water. But when you're using the shad-shaped swimmer, you're kind of limited on the jig heads you use. Typically, if I was going to throw, these style swim baits, I would go with a jig head like this one here that has a screw lock on the shank of the hook, because it really helps hold those baits on a little bit better, makes your baits last longer, not tear up when you're catching fish. But when you go to the shad-shaped swimmer, the body of that bait is so thin that you can't quite use the screw lock. It actually will bulge out of the head of that bait and not allow it to swim perfectly. So that's when I switch over to these guys right here. This is a tungsten ball head jig right here, but it has a collar rather than the screw lock. Hopefully you guys can see this in the video. So it has a collar on the shank of the hook right here. So that's going to slide inside that swim bait and not, this hook's actually bent out a little bit from catching some fish on it. So that collar is actually going to slide into the swim bait and not bulge out that head and change the action of it. So I always like to use a little bit of super glue. Let's grab my super glue here. I like to use a little bit of super glue. That way that swim bait is locked on there onto that jig head. It's going to last longer. And these shad-shaped swimmers are actually extremely durable. They last a long time. They can go through quite a few fish and really last you a whole day out on the water once you get them glued up on there. That's why I always like to do this when I'm at home, to allow that glue to set up, get that perfectly glued on there on that jig head, and then those swimmers are going to last a long time. So I'm just going to go ahead and rig these up, and then I'll show you guys the finished setup. Love my super glue, but these collar jig heads really help these thin-bodied swim baits. There's a lot of different swim bait options that look very similar to that. And all of them are gonna work. Don't get me wrong, you don't need to be throwing one single swim bait over the other. It's really whatever you have confidence in. But like I said, my favorite thing about these shad-shaped swimmers is how durable they are. They actually last a long time, and you can get a full day of fishing out of these 5 baits that I'm rigging up here right now, which is, that's awesome. I mean, it's gonna save you money, save you time on the water. Generally, it's gonna be cold. You don't wanna be messing around with baits when you're out there. So this is gonna save you some time and money on the water by using the shad-shaped swimmer. So this is like my go-to setup for like I said, probably 75% of the time right here. I have these are 1/8 right here, 1/8 ounce jig heads. I usually switch between 1/8, 3/16. If I'm trying to get this bait really deep, I will go up to 1/4 ounce jig heads, but really that's about as heavy as I will go on my jig head setup. You know, I've seen some guys using up to 3/8 or 1/2 ounce jig heads, but really that makes this A-rig weigh so much in total. It's really hard to cast without the right equipment. And I really like using the lighter jig heads and just count it down, let it sink a little bit, and then it allows me to slow down my retrieve to keep it in the strike zone. So I always prefer to use lighter jig heads, but that is another thing that's really customizable. It's up to you, and it really depends on how deep you want your A-rig to be running. For me, I'm generally fishing this more closer to the surface, fairly high in the water column, whether I'm bringing it over a piece of wood, shallow point, you know, a lay down, brush pile, something like that. So I always want those lighter jig heads so I can make it run higher if I want, but if I really slow down, I can still get it down to that depth. So it's really up to you on that, but for me, I'm going with 1/8 on this setup. Like I said, I will go up to 3/16. 1/8 and 3/16 are probably the ones that I use the most, and then 1/4 being the ones that I use the least out of those 3 sizes. So that's the setup right there. She is ready to go. Now let's dive into the equipment. I'm a fluorocarbon guy. I really like throwing my A-rig on fluorocarbon. You know, I've seen a lot of guys throw it on braided line before. For me, I really don't like throwing braided line, especially when it's cold out. You know, that braided line holds a lot of moisture. So every time you make a cast, it's gonna be flinging water all into your hand. It's gonna help contribute to your hands getting colder. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason, you know, I feel like 20-pound fluorocarbon is plenty strong to handle this big bait. If it gets hung up, I'm able to straighten out one of these hooks with the 20-pound fluorocarbon without breaking the line. So I'm a big time fluorocarbon guy. I feel like it casts a little bit better than braid. Obviously it's gonna be quieter coming through your guides or coming through the water. So that could help you get a few more bites. You know, I'm not using the fluorocarbon necessarily for the invisibility or because I feel like they're gonna see the braid, because I mean, we got literal steel framed wire coming off on the A-rig. So I'm not really worried about them seeing it. That's not why I'm choosing the fluorocarbon, but I like the castability and everything that goes along with the fluorocarbon. So I'm throwing it on 20-pound Seaguar InvizX fluorocarbon right there. Now let's get down to the rod. So this is something that's really important. Well, the rod and reel, both actually. This is super important in the grand scheme of things in your ease of use and overall enjoyment of fishing an A-rig. So there's lots of great options for rods. The most important thing you're gonna find is you want a longer rod. You know, this is a big heavy bait. You need to be able to make long sweeping casts, you know, to the side or overhead where you can really launch this big heavy bait and get that distance and get that casting distance that you need. So I'm throwing them right here. This is a new rod that I've been playing with this fall that I really like for the A-rig. It's a Phoenix Recon Elite. So it's a 7'9" heavy action. So a little bit longer rod, 7'9", pretty long, heavy action, so it's pretty stout, but it actually still has a fairly moderate action to it. You know, it bends, probably won't be able to see this, but it bends a good bit down the rod, so it's not super stiff, and that it's gonna straighten out these hooks when you set the hook on a fish, but heavy action, can handle these heavier baits. You know, if you put 3 1/8 ounce jig heads on there, this thing's gonna weigh a lot. So It's gotta be able to handle all of that. So another super important thing for me when I'm throwing an A-rig and choosing the right rod is gonna be the handle length. You know, this is kind of overlooked a little bit. You know, most of the rods that I use throughout the year, I like a shorter handle. But when I'm throwing this big A-rig, I like a longer handle because I can grab him with two hands and use that length and that leverage to really cast him further. So that's super important to me when I'm choosing the right rod on an A-rig. So I've thrown a bunch of different rods. This is one I've just recently been playing with, really like him. You know, I've thrown like the Dobyns Fury swim bait rod, 7'9", same sort of range. You could even get away with like a 7'6" heavy if you need to, but you want to make sure you got enough power to cast it, handle those big fish, and handle the weight of the entire bait. So 20-pound fluorocarbon. Another important thing, in my opinion, is choosing the right reel. So there is lots of different options for reels as well, and more specifically spool size. So for me, when I'm throwing this big heavy bait like this, I want a bigger reel. So this is actually a 300 series reel. So this is a Shimano Corrado 300 series, so it's a bigger reel. That means it's gonna hold more line, be able to hold a bunch of this 20-pound line. It's gonna be a bigger profile overall. The handle's bigger, the gears are bigger, everything's bigger on this, so it can handle big fish, big baits on this big rod. It doesn't feel bulky or anything like that. It just fits perfectly on here. So I like the 300 series. And then let's talk about gear ratio. For me, this is a cast and wind technique. So you're constantly retrieving this bait. If you're not winding it, you're just letting it sink down to the bottom where you're gonna start retrieving. So I like a slow gear ratio. This is a 6.2, well, 6.6. 6.6 in this model. Most of the Shimanos are 6.2. 6.6 to 1 gear ratio. So I like that 6 range on my gear ratio because you can get excited and start winding too fast. And if you have that slower gear ratio, it's still not going to be picking up as much line as if you had a faster gear ratio. And you can actually wind this bait too fast, and it's going to cause it to rise, get away from the fish. So I like that slower gear ratio on my A-rig setup because it's going to help you keep the bait in the strike zone a little bit longer, have that power to move it and handle those big fish. So that's it, guys. That's the whole setup right there. We dived into the juice on the A-rig. I got myself one rigged up here now, and we are ready to go. I'm gonna strap him down on the deck of the boat and might get out fishing here later this afternoon or tomorrow, and gonna catch me a few fish on him right there for sure. So appreciate you guys tuning into this video. Like I said, this was highly requested here lately. So hopefully I answered all your guys' questions. If you have any more questions, be sure to drop them in the comments down below. I'll do my best to answer them in the comments, or make another video if need be. But appreciate you tuning in. Leave me those likes and comments down below. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and we will see you guys next time.